Factorio, one of the most complex games ever made. It has layer upon layer of deep, interlocking systems that constantly challenge your brain and trap you in a relentless loop of optimization. But the story behind its development is far more interesting. In this video, we're going to do a deep dive into Factorio, how it was made, and what makes it so complex. Factorio's origins go all the way back to 2011. Michael Kovarik, a Czech programmer, was playing a Minecraft mod called Industrial Craft. Industrial Craft is one of the oldest and most influential tech mods. It turns Minecraft into its own industrial revolution. It adds electricity to power various machines like automated furnaces, miners, and compressors. Kovarik immediately saw the potential. He had always been interested in game development, and this idea felt like the perfect spark to finally pursue it. While still working at his office job, he started coding prototypes. After a while, Kovarik realized game development was harder than he had expected, and most importantly, he was a hyper-focused person. He couldn't work on two different things at once. By coincidence, things were not going well at the company he worked for. After reaching a breaking point with his manager, he decided to walk away from his stable job and bet everything on the game. He convinced his friend Thomas, who was also a software engineer, to team up and develop the game with him. They took all their savings and rented an apartment flat. They had roughly enough money for about 1 year of modest living, and just like that, the development of Factorio began. In the first week of development, they designed items and machines in Photoshop, but they soon realized that that approach wasn't going to work. It was time to make a plan. So they came up with a simple one: finish a basic version of the game within 4 months, release it in early access, keep developing with the sales income, and complete the game by the end of the year. While coding the basic version of the game, they discovered what makes Factorio special: the addictive gameplay loop. Mine resources, build factories to mine more resources, and build even more factories. Kovarik and Thomas became completely obsessed with this loop. As they played, they kept spotting things that annoyed them, and they fixed them, one by one, polishing the gameplay further. They would spend the next 2 weeks programming non-stop, then playing again. Through this process, the core loop evolved organically, with no specific goal in mind. For the next 3 months, they worked 16 hours every day to finish the game, and that's when the burnout started. When you spend that long on one thing, you lose sight of it. By that point, they couldn't tell if the whole idea was bad. Maybe they were wasting their time. They were trying to make a type of game that had never existed before. Liking the idea themselves was one thing, but would anyone else? And since it was their first game, they had no experience to fall back on. There was just too many unknowns. On top of that, their money was running out faster than expected. All of this pushed them to change their plan. Instead of early access, they launched a crowdfunding campaign. If no one donated, they'd know the idea wasn't good enough and would find jobs. If people supported it, they'd keep developing the game. They immediately set up a crowdfunding page with screenshots and a detailed description. The goal was 17,000 euros, which they thought was an insane amount of money. But one mistake they made was assuming that once they launched the campaign, players would naturally discover it, browse through projects, find Factorio, and donate. They thought that was how crowdfunding worked. They had no idea how huge the gaming world really was. Hundreds of crowdfunding projects launch every single day. But it didn't take long for them to realize that. After 2 weeks, they'd raised about 500 euros, mostly from friends who wanted to support them. So they gave up. It was actually a huge relief after those never-ending 16-hour workdays. Kovarik later said in an interview that after the crowdfunding campaign failed, they suddenly felt like an enormous weight had been lifted from their shoulders. They both found jobs within 2 days and wanted to relax for the remaining 14 days of the campaign. But then something unexpected happened. Because the campaign seemed like a failure anyway, they decided to give the prototype to anyone who emailed them. Why not let anyone who wanted to try it play the game, right? But this simple decision ended up saving them. People tried the game and discovered that, despite looking bad, the game was actually fun and had a lot of potential. Then a developer at Minecraft tweeted about them, and soon major gaming websites started covering their story. Suddenly, they were raising 1,000 euros per day and receiving emails nonstop. They couldn't believe it. They kept telling each other things like, "We can do anything we want now. Nothing can stop us." Sometimes they would just look at each other and scream. By the end, they raised 22,000 euros, 5,000 over their goal. After the campaign, they set up a website and launched it on early access. They decided to keep working on the game with daily sales. But a few months after the early access launch, sales dropped to almost zero. A couple of people who had missed the campaign bought copies, but that was about it. They kept telling themselves it was okay and that they could still finish the game. But after another few months, they realized they were going to run out of money again, and this was the second financial crisis. The solution came completely by chance. A friend who had nothing to do with games came to stay and asked to see what they were making. He looked at it and said the game looked really awful. Because of this random visit, they realized they should work on the game's graphics, so they made a graphics update for Factorio. After this update, sales suddenly tripled, and they began to actually live off the game. Only modestly at first, very slowly, but they were surviving, enough to finish the game. And that's also when Albert, Factorio's art director, joined the team. Factorio's visual design is actually one of the most fascinating aspects of its development. What looks like simple 2D graphics are actually the result of an incredibly sophisticated workflow that Albert perfected over years. His main goal was to build an art style that prioritized both playability and aesthetics. From the very beginning, the team chose a diametric projection at a 45-degree angle, basically an isometric view that gives you that bird's eye perspective. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice. When you're managing a massive factory with hundreds of conveyor belts, assemblers, and inserters, you need that view to see everything at once, spot bottlenecks, and plan your logistics. Normally, games like Command & Conquer used this style purely to cut costs and optimize performance on older hardware. For Factorio, it served a much more specific purpose. When people first see Factorio, they often think it's just a 2D game. But every single object, from the smallest inserter to the massive oil refineries, starts as a sketch Albert makes in his notebook. He then moves the blender to create a 3D model of his 2D sketch. The result is a series of animations with a surprising amount of detail. A good example is the oil pump jack, one of my favorites. The art style itself is distinctly industrial and utilitarian. Nothing looks futuristic or flashy. Everything has this mechanical feel, like actual industrial equipment that you would find in a real factory. The machines look heavy and functional. Albert developed a consistent visual language for Factorio. In one of the Special Friday Facts posts, he explained the visual style of the game. We are not steampunk nor dieselpunk, but we take profit from it all. Everything nice and coherent is always welcome, coming from the steampunk culture or its relatives. But Factorio is trying to have a personality of its own. Factorio tries to be Factorio punk. This visual consistency is one of Factorio's signatures. When you see a screenshot, you immediately know it's Factorio. No other game looks quite like it. The developers didn't chase trends or try to look like AAA games. They created something functional, original, and distinctly their own. At the beginning of Factorio's development, there was only one designer. But as development kept going on and the game continued selling, the team grew to 8 people. To create visual consistency and make designing easier, Albert built a materials and objects library for the team. It's basically a standardized collection of commonly used shapes and components. This not only kept the visuals consistent, but saved significant time when designing new objects. As sales grew steadily, they realized they couldn't do everything themselves. Kovarik was coding, managing, answering emails, fixing bugs, and designing features all at once. It was impossible. So they started hiring, but only when the money allowed it. By early 2014, they had 5 people working in the same room. The team was growing, and they were moving into their first real office, finally separating home and work. By October 2015, the team had grown to 10 people. They even took a team photo at an old abandoned railway station to add that Factorio feeling to it. They hired programmers first, people who could handle the technical parts while Kovarik focused on optimization and core systems. Their approach was to find people who were good at specific things, let them do those things, and get out of their way. No corporate bureaucracy, just talented people solving problems. And they weren't looking for celebrity developers or fancy recruits from big studios. Most of the time, they hired from their own modding community, people who already understood what Factorio was about. Before releasing the game on Steam, they faced one critical problem: refunds. Players were finding Factorio too complex and asking for refunds almost immediately. This was significantly hurting their sales. So Kovarik tried to make the first 5 minutes as easy as possible. He knew those first 5 minutes were critical. They solved this through real-time playtesting. They'd invite a friend who had no gaming background, sit them in front of the computer, and Kovarik would watch them from behind with a notebook, quietly taking notes. And this brings us to another point: the complexity. Factorio is not complex in the way you might think. It has something called emergent complexity. You start with simple rules, mine ore, smelt it into plates, craft it into parts. But as those rules interact with each other, something far more complicated appears. Inserter is just a small mechanical arm that moves items from one place to another. Simple enough. But then you need to filter what it moves, control when it activates, connect it to a circuit network, sync it with other machines, and suddenly, that one little arm is part of a system involving logic gates, combinators, and conditional signals. Essentially, a programmable computer built inside a factory game. And that's just one mechanic. Factorio has more than 80 of them. This is what separates it from other games. Most games add complexity by giving you more content, more levels, more enemies, more weapons. But Factorio adds complexity by making its systems talk to each other in ways that nobody fully anticipated. As the game sold more and the studio grew, Kovaric's role fundamentally changed. He was no longer the programmer writing code and fixing bugs. That era was over. Now, his job is approval and direction. It's the natural evolution of any successful game. At some point, the founder's vision contributes to the project more than their programming or design skills. So that's what Kovaric did. He stepped back from the technical work and focused on guiding the project. Factorio has been in development for 7 years. I had to basically do everything at the start, but these days, my role is mainly something I would call an approver. I'm trying to make sure that only additions and changes that are good enough are pushed to the game. Through the development process, they learned another crucial lesson. On Steam, you essentially get one wave. It doesn't matter whether it comes with early access or the full game. With the first launch comes the wave. When the game later exits early access, there might be a little wavelet, but it's nowhere near as important. Since they weren't doing completely badly financially, they could afford to wait. They understood how much better the game could be when they launched it on Steam, and the exponentially bigger wave that would follow. So they kept delaying and delaying to have a good trailer, to fine-tune everything. And after 3 years, in 2016, they officially released Factorio on Steam. Today, Factorio is the first game people think of when it comes to factory-building games. The game has earned $180 million and sold over 8 million copies. It achieved a 98% positive rating on Steam, one of the highest ratings of any game ever. But it wasn't over yet. For years after release, the team stayed quiet. They posted their regular devlogs but didn't reveal what they were working on. Then, in 2023, they finally announced the Space Age DLC. The concept was simple but massive. After launching a rocket on Novice, the game's starting planet, you build space platforms and travel to 4 new planets. Each planet has unique resources, challenges, and enemies. You would need to manage logistics across an entire solar system. Another thing about the Space Age DLC is its price. When they announced the price, the Factorio community was shocked. $35. It's the same price as the base game. But the developers didn't back down. They explained their reasoning. Space Age wasn't just a DLC. It was practically a full game's worth of content. 4 new planets, entirely new logistics systems, space platforms, new enemies, new production chains. They spent years developing it. And they were 100% right. When Space Age released, it added over 100 hours of new gameplay. The expansion fundamentally changed how you play Factorio. Space Age launched on October 21st, 2024, alongside a massive free 2.0 update for the base game. Within the first week, it sold over 400,000 copies. One thing that really caught my attention about Space Age is how they designed the solar system. It's not just random planets. Each planet feels like it was built around an actual scientific concept. Take Vulcanus, for example. It's the closest planet to the sun, and just like Mercury in our solar system, it's absolutely scorching. The surface is covered in lava, and the planet has 4 times Novice's gravity. Giant worms inhabit this hellscape. Now, traditionally, we'd say a planet this hot can't support life, but they tried the concept of silicon-based life. According to some scientists, instead of carbon-based life like us, organisms could theoretically evolve using silicon as their biochemical foundation. On the complete opposite end, there's Aquilo. This planet is so far from the sun that the solar panels barely work, just 1% efficiency, similar to conditions on Saturn's moon, Titan. The entire surface is covered in liquid ammonia oceans, with temperatures hovering around -70 degrees Celsius. You build on icebergs, and every structure needs constant heating or it freezes. On planets this cold, what looks like water isn't water at all. It's flammable liquids like methane, or in this case, ammonia. Water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, so any actual water is locked beneath this hydrocarbon sea. It's literally an ocean of fuel. Think of it as Saudi Arabia reimagined as a planet. All these details reveal that Kovarik is deeply interested in science. After digging deeper, I discovered that Kovarik's father was a scientist who even named a scorpion species after Factorio. And that explains a lot. Then we have the habitable zone, the region where life can actually exist. Scientists estimate there are over 100,000 planets in habitable zones just within the Milky Way galaxy. The starter planet, Novus, sits right in this zone. It resembles Earth from millions of years ago, covered in giant insects, biters, and spitters that relentlessly attack your factory. This isn't random either. About 300 million years ago, Earth went through the Carboniferous period. Oxygen levels reached around 30%, significantly higher than today's 21%. Because of this oxygen-rich atmosphere, insects grew enormous. There were dragonflies with wingspans as wide as hawks. The world literally looked like Novus back then. Gleba is another habitable planet, but it's radically different. It's a jungle world with twice the gravity and a thick CO2 atmosphere. What makes it fascinating is that you can harvest iron and other resources directly from specialized trees. Now, this isn't realistic, but it fits the game's internal logic. In real life, there are hyperaccumulator plants, like nickel-eating species, but you'd need to harvest massive amounts to extract even a kilogram of usable metal. The planet also features crab-like creatures. Interestingly, we still don't know if there's life on other planets, but if there is, convergent evolution suggests crab-like body plans might be surprisingly common, a phenomenon scientists call carcinization, where all species eventually evolve into crabs because it is the most survivable body form on any planet. The horseshoe crab, for example, has stayed the same for 450 million years, and they are even older than the trees. Then there's Fulgora, a planet covered in ruins from an ancient civilization, constant lightning storms, oil sands everywhere, and the only resources are scrap metal left behind by whoever came before. Something catastrophic happened to this civilization, and now you're scavenging through the remnants. The unique twist is that instead of mining raw material, you're mining things already processed into complex components. You have to recycle everything back down to basic resources. The name Fulgora comes from a Roman goddess. She is generally associated with lightning. And finally, space travel. Here's where the game diverges completely from reality. The planets are only 15,000 to 30,000 kilometers apart, far closer than the distance between planets in our solar system. In real space, you'd accelerate, coast for most of the journey, then deaccelerate. In Factorio, you thrust the entire time, and if you stop, you slow down as if there's air resistance in the vacuum of space. The asteroid belts are densely packed with rocks when, in reality, they're mostly empty space. You could fly through a real asteroid belt without seeing a single rock. And the planets don't orbit, they're fixed in place. It would be far more efficient if planets orbited the sun. You could time your launches for optimal transfer windows using less fuel, just like we do when sending missions to Mars. But they weren't trying to make a space simulator. The science is there to make it feel grounded and believable, but gameplay always comes first, and I think that's the right choice. The solar system feels real enough that you can live out the fantasy of becoming a multi-planetary industrial civilization, building factories across different planets. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. Another thing about Kovarik is competition. He's not against it. Instead, he supports it. While reading his devlogs, I encountered so many comments from him about other factory-building games. Most of them never succeeded, but some of them, like Satisfactory, achieved great success. From the point of view of a Factorio developer, I would say that Satisfactory makes me proud and insecure at the same time. As the game is undoubtedly inspired by Factorio, it makes me proud that we most probably helped to make this genre become a thing. It makes me insecure as well, as it could also completely overshadow our game. To that, I would say that if they manage to do a game that is better than Factorio on every level, then they deserve it. If there are still going to be areas where Factorio is better, the potential success of the game can actually help us. As when more people come to play the game, more people will eventually look for alternatives in the similar way as the people asking for other games like Factorio from time to time. 7 years after Kovarik wrote this, Satisfactory and Factorio both have 8 million sales on Steam. If you're curious about the full story behind Satisfactory's development, I have a video on exactly that. Go check it out. Before ending the video, I want to talk about Friday Facts. Friday Facts is the devlog of Factorio where every Friday developers publish updates about the game. I found all the information in this video from this blog. At the beginning, the team only wrote things like, "It's 4 in the morning and we're still programming," or "It's dark, cats are wandering in the streets." But then they started writing about their development process, the decisions they made, and even some jokes. In one Friday Facts, they published a Factorio mobile version. When I first read the blog, I thought it was real and went to check the mobile version, but couldn't find it. Then I came back, read the rest of the blog, and found out that it was actually an April Fool's joke.